Hey, St. Patrick's, friends of St. Patrick's, Mark here with you. I wanted to give you a word real quick leading up and talking about our wrapping of this series over First Peter. We've been in it now. This will be our 6th week, I believe, coming up this Sunday. And we've talked about First Peter's kind of broad message, which was, of course, directed towards the people who were discouraged and under persecution, a small group of people dispersed all over the area of the Mediterranean. And we talked a little bit about what God was asking us to do as Christians. It's like a manual of resistance. But it really comes to a head and helps us understand what kind of resistance in chapter 5. And I want to give you a little bit of a preview into that sermon this Sunday. In chapter 5, he talks specifically to the elders and the priests and the pastors of the churches. But he also makes a general call to all of us about being humble. He says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God." It really is a picture and a wrap-up of this idea that we are entrusting ourselves when we subject ourselves to authorities, all the things that we talked about over the past few weeks, when we allow Him to find the vengeance, when we don't repay evil with evil, we are ultimately entrusting ourselves to God. He will take care of all of that. And then you get to chapter 5, and he makes a general call for humility. And then he talks about this resistance, this idea of resisting. Now, I know it can be tempting, and the world certainly asks us to do this, to take resistance into our own hands, as if we don't do it, no one else will. But what we see is that we are in more danger. Peter is much more concerned with our resistance against the enemy trying to cause us to sin than he is about anything the world can do to us physically, whether harming or persecuting or whatnot. He says that our enemy, be aware of our enemy, which is like a roaring lion. What an incredible metaphor, where he says this roaring lion is seeking to devour someone, so that we ought to be ready and be aware of what's going on. Your resistance to sin is a much bigger deal than worrying about how to resist the forces of an evil government or persecution from a business partner or whatever else is happening in your world. And things can be confusing, alarming, and frightening. But we ought to be much more frightened of the enemy trying to cast us aside from our faith. That is the ultimate resistance we can do, that we resist the schemes of the enemy. It's a greater danger, in fact, at least in 2 ways. It's more common. You're always facing that battle where the lion is trying to get to you. But also, sinning is a bigger danger because it does more damage to you than some sort of physical harm or some sort of outside persecution. It's just the reality of it. When we sin, it affects us spiritually and physically and emotionally. It causes real spiritual and physical death. But what can an outside persecutor do? So this is our priority. Our resistance, our rebellion against the forces of the wickedness of this world and the spiritual forces of this world is really a resistance to sin. That's our primary focus. I want to encourage you that with this week. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on Sunday and hope you can make it. This Sunday also, as we wrap up our series on 1 Peter, we'll have a church-wide lunch afterwards. So hope you can stay for that. It's a great time to get to know one another. We have such a high value of community. We don't do this Christian life alone. And so hopefully you can stay, make plans to stay and hang and have some great food. Hope to see you all Sunday. God bless you all. Praying for you this week. We'll see you then.